You have to understand the importance of being a secure, safe, and responsive parent in those early years. If you can manage that, you are leaps and bounds ahead of the game and really going to be setting a strong foundation for your child.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the biggest. That's a comma.
To see you again.
Hi, good to see you as well.
I'm excited to talk to you, like I told you before, because I think this is a topic that all of us need, a parenting coach, to talk about these, challenging ages like I am in right now, have a toddler. So before we get into it, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about the work you do?
Sure. My name is Jill Urbane, and I'm a clinical social worker who has been working for the last 27 years as an early childhood interventionist, working with families with children under the age of 5, primarily toddlers, in their homes, providing them with support and coaching and information on development to try to help get their kids on track.
Yeah. And how did you get started in this work?
Well, that's kind of funny. I never planned to be here. I always knew I was going to be in mental health. That's what I thought. I worked in psychiatric units, and I worked with developmentally disabled individuals and mentally ill individuals in psychiatric hospitals. And then I got a job working in a prison as a prison counselor. And I really liked it. We did a lot of cognitive kind of restructuring with the inmates, and the inmates were all very, very young. They were all under the age of 20, and they were all serving life sentences for the most part. And it was so tragic to see these young men who were so bright in so many ways, and they all had the same history, right, of neglect or abuse or just rough home lives. And that led me to want to get into something where maybe I could keep these young men from ending up there. So I got into protective services thinking I could support families. And I did that for about 5 years. And I learned a lot. That's where I fell in love with being in people's houses and working with families. I loved that. But it certainly took an emotional toll being in those situations and the stress when I was just starting out with having my own family. And an opportunity came along in a local school district for a new program that they were starting with an early intervention. And I hounded the special education director for 2 months until she gave me the job. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow, what
And
a
I love
journey.
it.
What a journey.
Yeah, I know. Life pushes us to where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I believe so too. And that's such a good observation that you had that when you were, I guess it was something like a juvenile prison.
It was like young offenders, but they were all serving adult incarceration,
Wow,
all
that's
charged as
such
adults. Some of them were even 13.
oh my gosh, that's so complex because you hear about these like crazy, these like hideous crimes that young people do sometimes. But then at the same time, I'm like, of course, like you have to be like accountable, and the victims, they want justice. But then at the same time, I'm like, these are kids, and their, frontal lobe isn't developed. And like,
Yes.
it's such a complex situation. I can't imagine what a mistake a 13-year-old made. He has to be, for the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah. It all goes down to trauma.
Yeah, we can talk a little about what we can do to prevent these things.
Right.
Yeah. So you said what are the age groups that you work with for the most part?
Usually, I would say anywhere from 0 to 5, primarily 3 and under. So most of the kids I'm working with are toddlers in that 18 months to 3-year range. And I love toddlers. I know that they are so hard. The early childhood years are the hardest for parents by far.
Yeah.
But if we can get it right and get the tools that we need in those first 5 years, we can set this beautiful, strong, healthy foundation for our kids to grow up and be emotionally resilient.
Yeah, so let's get a little bit into that. Like, can you give us some tips about how we can like nurture toddlers that will be, good, children and adults?
Well, I think the pillars that I kind of go by with parents is to, first of all, understand development, right? When we understand what's going on with our young children as their brains are growing, it makes it easier for us to meet them where they're at, right? Like understanding that kids don't really get to the analytical part of their brain until around the age of 5 to 6, right? So they don't have the ability to think to themselves, I really want to hit my mom in the face right now, but I probably shouldn't because I'll get in trouble. They don't really have that
They're
skill.
impulsive. Right.
Exactly. There's still, I love the book by Dan Siegel, The Whole Brain Child, and he talks about the downstairs brain and the upstairs brain. Our toddlers are completely living in the downstairs brain. And our preschoolers are hanging out down there too. They're building a rickety set of steps to the upstairs analytical part of the brain, but they're not going to be living there for a couple of years. They're up there every now and then, and they might be able to master some things every now and then, but they quickly tumble back down those stairs when they're faced with frustration, anger, fear, things of that nature. So I think that's one of the things that makes the preschool years particularly challenging for parents, is because they have this huge burst in vocabulary,
Right.
and they can tell us these huge complex stories, but then we ask them a question or tell them to do something or get them the wrong cup, and they are down on the floor having a tantrum like a 2-year-old. Well, they're not up there yet with that emotional regulation. Everything
Right.
gets filtered through that emotional brain first until they start to really reside up there in that analytical part of the brain.
Yeah,
So when we understand that as parents, it just makes it easier for us then to have developmentally appropriate expectations and realize that this is normal and, oh, he just needs more support. We're not quite there yet, rather than I'm doing something wrong as a parent, or there's something wrong with my child because he's 4 and still having meltdowns, or, 2 and still hitting people.
Yeah, I think that's something that I read up on when I was reading about parenting a bit when my son was younger, and that's something that I wish they told you like before. I feel like there should be some mandatory course. You know how you have like these prenatal courses? Like you should also have this like
Yes.
crash course on toddlers, because it would also prevent a lot of, frustration for like the parents and help us like understand them better. And these are things that I was like explaining to my husband. He doesn't know. He's just impulsive and he's reacting, or he's overstimulated. But these are the things he's like, what? Like, it doesn't make sense, because now, especially like you explained, he's communicating more. So he's like, he understands, like, just because you can communicate doesn't mean that you understand and you're processing things the same as adults would.
Exactly. And if we know what's going on at these different developmental stages, particularly with the brain development and the social emotional stages, it makes it so much easier to look at those behaviors and those things that we're seeing. They're so frustrating and challenging in those early years through a different lens, right? It's through a lens of, oh, they're not quite there yet, rather than, oh, I'm failing or there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we look at it through the lens of, oh, they're not quite there yet, then our first reaction for most parents is like, oh, well, I got to figure out how to support them to learn that skill.
Right. Yeah. And how will we go about that? Supporting toddlers or really young children to build these type of skills, so that when they are able to understand more and really process things better, it'll be like a smoother transition.
Well, I think that it's kind of a 3-pronged approach, right? So first of all, we have to understand kind of the basics of development and developmental stages. And this is a tool, again, that it's our strongest tool as a parent, because anytime something arises as our children grow, the elementary years, the middle school years, the high school years, you're going to see all sorts of different things going on, right? And be like, why are they doing that? I always encourage parents, start with the development. What's going on developmentally there? What's going on in their brains? Why is my teenager sleeping all the time? Well, it's because they've got all sorts of hormonal things going on in the teen years that require them to sleep more. So start with the development. The next thing we need to do is we need to look at and understand our child's unique wiring. And that's related to their temperament, their personality, right? And then once we understand that, because we all learn differently and have different
Right.
preferences, when we understand that, then we have to look at, okay, well, what's my unique wiring as a parent? What's my parenting style? What am I bringing to this game? And when we understand our children's temperament, then it's up to us to make the change in how we're interacting, not for our children to change to accommodate us,
I love
right?
that.
So for example, in my house, I've got 2 kids, they're adults now. But when they were younger, I knew right away that my son is more like me, right? Like I'm the person where if I'm really stressed out or bothered or upset about something, I just need a little bit of space. I'm not ready to talk about it. Let me go chill myself out. Let me process my emotions, and then I can talk about it. My husband is a guy who's like, I want to verbally process everything right now. So pushing a kid whose temperament is not that leads to this, right? So he had to learn to change the way that he was trying to facilitate communication in those moments with him. So he could meet him where he was at with his unique wiring, which stayed with him for the rest of his life. My daughter, verbal processor. So they get along great.
Right.
That's easy for him, right?
And
But
you had
it's
to
our
change your
job.
approach. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have to recognize what we're coming in with as parents and our parenting style and adjust it to accommodate our children and their unique wiring. Once we understand the development, our children's wiring, our wiring, then we can figure out the strategies of where we start, depending on what behavior or developmental milestone we're working on.
Yeah, I love that starting with the developmental part and understanding like the macro where your child is right now, but then zooming in on their like specific temperament. And then it's funny how you say that because that's like a lot of moms tell me that. My sister told me is that you think you like know you have your first child and then you think you get them, you like, okay, I know how to parent. But then you have another child and it's like you have to learn all over again. Everything is like out the window and you have to, change your approach all over again.
Exactly. And I think that, if we want to have a solid foundation for our kids, the one piece that I think is often, I don't want to say overlooked, but maybe put on the back burner by far too many parents, especially moms, is their own mental and emotional well-being. Moms have a tendency to put everybody else's needs in front of theirs because that's what for eons of time has been communicated as to what a good mom does is she takes care of everybody else's needs. And I don't know if you're aware of this or your listeners have heard, but in August of this year, the Surgeon General of the United States issued an advisory for parental stress and mental health. There's a crisis. I've been in people's homes for 27 years, so I've seen this coming. Parents are overwhelmed. They're struggling with depression and anxiety. They've got so many pressures on them with finances and just the whole kind of how do you navigate social media and the negativity that we're seeing in the world. And it's affecting their mental health. That trickles down to our kids. Our kids' mental health and emotional well-being is dependent on ours. So one thing I want parents to really understand, and I spend a lot of time focusing on, is helping them to understand that taking care of yourself is not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's been my approach because I think we talked about it during our little introductory chat, how I just kind of I neglected myself in the first like 6 months. And then I like kind of realized, okay, I matter too. And if I don't take care of myself, then everything, like I'm kind of like the driving force behind, everything that's going on up right here when it comes to taking care of our son. So I'm like, I'm a primary caregiver, but I need to take care of myself as well. And that's when it changed. Like I was happier, I was better rested, and I was like eating better. But before, it's just like, I think it is all the societal pressure. And this is so funny because I remember I would tell my clients this. I'm a dietitian and I would tell them, because I would tell like a lot of clients that were mothers and they would say, oh, but I don't have time for this. I don't have time to exercise. And then it was so funny because I would preach this. And then once I finally became a mom, I understood how, especially during that first, like, I guess it's also hormones and being overwhelmed. And when you don't have a lot of help as well, you're like trying to do everything. And finally, I like snapped out of it. And now I'm just like you said, I said, self-care isn't selfish. It's like, it's a necessity. You have to do it. And it's setting an example for your kid. Like this is, and his future partner will know that, she has to, take care of herself. He needs to support her. And just not expecting, like not having these unrealistic expectations from women in general.
Yeah, I 100%. I mean, this is kind of like the thing that I am so passionate about right now, just because I see it affecting so many families. I actually had a young mom that I was working with not that long ago. And she had a little guy living with her parents, and I was there. He had a speech delay, so I was there to help support her with the speech delay. But when I got there, she had a history of mental health issues, and she just was clearly depressed. She was fighting back tears during the visit. She was very detached. You know, she was looking longingly at her son, and he was more interested in hanging out with grandma than with her. And she's like, it hurts when he doesn't want to be around me. And so we started talking about that energy, right? Like the energy, we have a bubble around us of energy. And when our kids are in it, they're going to attune to that. They co-regulate to us, right? So we have to understand our energy and recognize that this was a call for her to work on self-care and filling her buckets. So we talked about this for a long time. And then I didn't see them for about a month for a number of reasons. And I saw them recently. She opened up the door. And as soon as she opened up the door, I said, "Who are you?" And she just looked at me. She was glowing. She said, "My mom's not going to be in this session today. It's just going to be you and me." The little guy was happy. She's like, "Oh my gosh, things are going so well." The behavior, because he was having lots of meltdowns with her, not with grandma, but with her. Lots of behavioral problems. And she's like, "Everything's great. I mean, he still has an occasional meltdown every now and then, but it's not like it was. I mean, it's so much more manageable." And then his speech is taken off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "So look at you. What did you do?" And she said, "Well, I got into therapy. I've been taking care of myself. I found a job. I got a promotion at my job. I'm spending time with some friends." And I said, "Do you see that all of this from him is because of you taking care of you?"
Wow,
She
that's
had
powerful.
completely different energy. It was just so beautiful to see. I wish I could have like recorded the before and after to share with folks, to just show the tremendous difference in how she was showing up for her little guy. And now her bubble, her energy bubble, was filled with joy and love instead of despair and anxiety.
That's
And who wouldn't
beautiful.
want to be in that?
Right. And we'd have to like kids absorb our energy and it's funny how like my son he'll connect with some adults like instantly and they are like
Mhm.
usually like people they're just like, positive people, happy people and then some people he's like kind of a there was someone in our family she was not doing well like mentally and he would
Mhm.
cry. He was afraid to be next to her and I'm like, "Wow, it's like they sense our energy."
They do. They do. They've actually done some studies and found that infants as young as 6 months old can sense marital discord in a home.
Mm.
I mean, from their bassinet, they can feel energy is big. I know sometimes parents think I'm talking kind of woo woo, but it's like, look, you've walked into a room before and
And
had
feel the
somebody in that
tension.
room and feel the tension. You don't know what happened. All you know is the minute you walked in, something was off.
Right.
We are energy. And we have
Yeah.
to keep that in mind when we're holding our kids. I mean, I remember when I had my son, I mean, it was very overwhelming, all of it. It wasn't an easy transition for me. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm holding him in the rocker, and I'm paying attention to him. But I wasn't attuned to him, right? Because I was going through the baby blues, right? Postpartum. So even though I'm holding him and meeting his basic needs, I wasn't attuned to him. I couldn't be responsive to him.
Mhm.
That's what happens when we are overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, and depression. It affects our ability to be attuned and responsive to our children, which that sets the foundation for attachment. And our attachment with our children, what happens in those early formative years is going to stay with them for life and going to affect how they interact in relationship with other adults later on in life. They can work on that, therapy can help later on if there are problems there.
Right.
But we have to understand the importance of being a secure, safe, and responsive parent in those early years. If you can manage that, you are leaps and bounds ahead of the game and really going to be setting a strong foundation for your child.
I love that. Forget all the expensive gadgets and all of
Oh,
these
yeah.
things. Start with the
Oh,
basics. Creating
it
that's
is really,
free.
honestly, that's it. Like, I mean, I can't stress enough that connection, helping our kids. I mean, what we really need to grow up and be emotionally healthy and secure is we need to feel safe. We need to feel seen. We need to feel heard. We need to feel loved, and we need to feel like we matter. If we can look through that lens during our interactions with our children, knowing that those are the 5 needs to have solid mental health later on, it would really shape our responses to them. I think if we kept that in the forefront of our mind during those interactions, when our 3-year-old is like, mommy, look, mommy, look, mommy, look. We're like, yeah. Just a second. Right? They're not feeling seen in that moment. Does it mean we have to drop everything in that moment? No, but we can turn to them and say, honey, I can't wait to see what it is that you have to show me. I just need 2 minutes and I'm coming right over to see what's going on. Okay. Now I feel seen. Now I feel heard. Now I know that I'm important and I matter to you.
Wow, and that's just such a small fix. They can be nagging a little bit, but just understanding that they want to be seen, they want to have our attention from it and explaining to them instead of like acting like they're a nuisance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a home visit a while back with a little guy who was very, very busy and very active. He was about 2.5. And the mom was like, oh, he hits all the time. He hits all the time. And it's driving me crazy. And so we're talking, and he went over and tried to sit on her, and she's busy talking to me. And she didn't even know she was doing these things, right? She's just trying to have a conversation with me. And she moved him off her lap. He came over again, leaned on her, grabbed her hand, and she moved him off because she's in this conversation with me. And I'm watching all of this, right? And eventually he just hauled off and whacked her in the face. And she's like, see, he hits me. And I said, he was looking for connection with you. And he didn't get it. So he tried to get it the only way that he had left to try. So I said, let's try this again the next time he comes over. When he comes over, I want you to stop with me, focus on him, grab his hand and say, honey, you can sit on my lap while mom finishes talking to Jill. That one little switch decreased the hitting, so it was almost non-existent.
So is that common? Usually when they're hitting, they're seeking connection?
It depends on the situation. I mean, sometimes they're hitting because they're angry and their bodies are out of control and they're just dysregulated, right? Sometimes they're hitting because they're looking for a cause and effect, right? This happens a lot when we're hanging on to like our 18-month-old and we're all happy and having a good time, and all of a sudden they just, for some reason, just whack us in the face, right? There's no maliciousness there, right?
And they're too young to even like explain to them. I remember my son, right around like 18 months.
Yeah. So they're just doing cause and effect. But sometimes it can be for connection, right? That they're coming up, and if we're not tuning into them and letting them know, I see you, they're going to escalate until they feel seen and heard.
Mm-hmm. And since we're in I have a lot of moms who are still like expanding their families. And what about that transition from 1 to 2 children? Is that something that that you have a lot of house visits for? Because this is something that I always hear about, like making sure the older kid isn't jealous because you're attending too much to the younger child. And how would parents navigate this transition? Or prepare the older sibling, I guess, for the transition?
Yeah, I think that, whenever big changes are coming up, especially for young children, transitions are hard. We have to remember for our firstborn that they're used to being the center of the world, right? Now they're just going to be another planet, and that is a hard switch for them to get used to. So I recommend to parents, like, as soon as you find out that you're going to be having a baby, we're going to talk a lot about babies. We're going to get a baby. We're going to work on doing things with the baby so that this becomes a connection piece for us. And, oh, look at how sweet you are with your baby. And little boys too. I know some dads are like, I'm not having we want to set them up to be nurturing, loving, caring fathers, right?
Yeah.
They can play with babies.
Yeah, my son has a baby doll. He loves it.
Yes. I mean, I love that I'm seeing more of that with young boys, but we want to start setting a foundation like, oh, let's get your baby out. Oh, your baby is sad. And oh, your baby's quiet. So all the things that you're going to be saying when the sibling arrives, you can start practicing those during play. Play is mastery. Play is where children are doing all of their learning. So if we can infuse the things that we want to teach them into play, which is usually filled with joy. And if we can attach joy to any piece of learning, it's just going to multiply and strengthen the learning that's taking place. And we're filling them with positive things. Look at what a good daddy you are. Look at what a good brother you are, if you want to call the baby his sibling, right? Look at how careful you are. Look at how gentle you are. Are they going to understand all of those words right away, depending on their age? No, but over time they will. So then when the baby comes, right, you really want to foster on, look at how good you are with it, with the baby. Look at how good you are with your sister. So you're reinforcing the things that he was doing with the toy. If you have to change the baby's diaper, hey, it's time for us to change our baby's diaper. You go get your baby. I'll do this baby.
Oh,
You can help me with this baby. Get them involved in it. So it's not this thing that's mom and dad's that takes their time. It's our family. I'm involved in this too. You can be my helper by going and getting a diaper. You can be my helper by putting the bottle in the sink, right? You are such a good helper. You are so helpful to me. And your sister is so lucky to have you. Building that connection from an early age. But probably the biggest thing that needs to happen, depending on the child, because some kids, they don't have a real big reaction initially to having a sibling because they don't do a whole lot. For those kids, a lot of times it happens when the baby starts moving and touching their stuff. Then they're like, oh, I don't like this baby. He's touching my stuff and knocking my Legos down. But what you want to do for those kids who are maybe struggling with it is you want to have a set connection time. That's just a one-on-one time every day with them to fill their bucket. Every day, right? Because remember, we want to feel safe, seen, and heard. When that baby comes along, I don't feel as seen as I was. I don't feel as heard as I was. So setting aside connection time on a daily basis. And it could just be that we're going to, go outside and sit on the swings for a while. We're going to go for a bike ride. It doesn't have to be anything, but we're going to play upstairs. You get to, and let them be in control. You get to decide. This is your time. This is your special mom and son time, or dad and son time. So that they're constantly getting their bucket filled. If you can keep their bucket filled, they're not going to be as likely to lash out and struggle.
Wow, those are all great. And I like how you said focusing on like teaching through play, because I hear that's such an important element. That's not just for this situation, for anything that you want to teach, you can use play, right?
Absolutely. I mean, especially when it comes to like social interactions, getting the dolls out and, as they get older, oh, that hurt my feelings. I think I'm going to go over here. And you can act out all of those things, and it helps them to master stuff. Kids act out their emotions through their play as they get older. I'll never forget, my daughter was 3 and she came home from preschool. I could hear her upstairs with her dolls and she was like, "You're mean. I don't like you." And I was like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And I talked to the preschool teacher and she's like, "Oh no, there's a couple of girls that are getting into some squabbles over some toys." And I'm like, "Was she like saying those things in school, or were they saying?" She's like, "No, none of that. It was just normal kid stuff." But I had to learn that she was just acting that out in that rough way to feel power again, right? So they work those emotions out, just like we go out and talk with our friends, we get it all out, we vent and vent and vent, get it all out, and then we're like, "Oh, it's out." Our kids do it through their play. So don't be alarmed if you hear your kids doing that during play. Just know that they're just getting out and mastering a situation how maybe they wish they would have handled it in the future to get those emotions out.
That's interesting. And I like how you said to involve them. Like, it's not like mine and daddy's baby. It's our baby. It's the family. And this is something that I use in like my profession. I will always say, like, when parents talk about having like picky eaters. So I say, like, maybe involve them in the cooking process and help them like prepare the food. And this is something that really helps kids. They're more willing to try foods when they've made it. They were part of the process. So I could see this working in this situation as well.
Exactly. I think it's really crucial to lay a foundation of love and connection between siblings. Like my husband and I always knew that we wanted our kids to be closer to their siblings than we were to ours. We had some strained relationships. And so we invested a lot of time and energy on trying to enhance and build that connection. And, this is your sister and she relies on you, and that's your brother and he's always going to be there for you. You need to be there for him, so that they always had each other's back. And I'm so proud of the relationship that the two of them have. They are best friends. They can't go without talking to each other. I mean, every time she comes home, they've got to go out and spend time together alone as siblings to connect. And it just makes us feel really good as parents to know that we did the work early on to build this beautiful relationship that's going to last them their lifetime.
Yeah, that I'm also close to my siblings, and it's always strange to me when I see like friends that aren't close to this, because to me it's
Yeah.
normal, but I didn't even think about it. Like that's something that my parents would say to us also. Like they would really tell us like that this is your sister, and you know you have to you are your brother's keeper, you know, things like that. You know, like we have to have each
Yeah.
other's back, and they always like talked about teamwork and working together. And now that you
Yes.
say
Oh, I love
that,
that.
like, yeah, I'm really just now like having this, because people always, even my husband comments on that, like, you guys are so close. And then it's strange to me, but I guess it's our parents being intentional. And so that's
Yeah.
good for us to be intentional about cultivating that relationship between our children.
I think early on, it's so important to me to parents to start getting them thinking about the big picture, right? Like we set goals for what we want to do with our careers and, you know, where our house is and all of those kinds of things. And if we want to get married and have kids, but we don't always sit down and really think about like what we want to cultivate in our children, what we want to teach our children, what kind of adults we want them to be, right? Sometimes I feel like it's kind of like, well, we're just going to muddle along and do the best we can while we're going, but we really need to think about that. Like, what do we want those relationships with their siblings to be like? How do we want them to handle difficult interactions with peers, right? How do we want them to be able to muster through and do hard things? We have to think about those things early on and start setting that foundation, even in those first couple of years, right? Helping them to understand instead of jumping in to put that last puzzle piece in that they're struggling with, to let them figure it out. And then say to them, look at that. That was hard for you and you did it. Good job. That's how we build resiliency. That's how we build a growth mindset. So thinking more intentionally about those things and the bigger picture and working on those things, because every day with our kids, I mean, I read a number last night that kids, and this was from Harvard, under the age of 3, they are creating 1 million neural pathways per second.
Wow, per second.
Per second.
Wow.
If that doesn't hit home, the importance of getting a solid foundation for our children in those first formative years. By the time they're 3, their brain is 80% adult size. And that's because of all the myelination and the neurons that are neural pathways that are being built in the brain. So we got to figure out how we can give them the best start, because that's what we all want for our kids, is to grow up and be emotionally healthy people that don't need therapy or medications and are kind and
Yes.
compassionate to other people, right? I mean, that's what we want for our kids, that they have healthy relationships with friends and with their loved ones. And that all starts in those first 5 years.
Wow. And speaking of that, you
No
spoke to
pressure.
me, right? You mentioned resilience, and that's something that, to me, I think that's such a great virtue to have. And I feel like, first of all, by the way, I feel like having siblings helps you build resilience, because we would fight and tease each other. Like, it made us have such thick skin. And that's something that I feel like that it's a little bit lacking nowadays. And I want to ask you this. What do you think about gentle parenting, or at least how I understand it? Maybe, you know, like, I feel like it's a little bit more permissive, and just tell me your take on that. At least the gentle parenting that I see publicized a lot on social media.
Okay, so I'm going to share my I hate the term gentle parenting, only because I think it really confuses a lot of parents, right? Gentle parenting at its core is supposed to be a secure parenting style, right? It's supposed to be, I like to use the love and logic terms. You got the drill sergeant, you've got the helicopter parent, and you've got the consultant parent, right? The authoritative. Yeah. That's what gentle parenting is supposed to be. And the consultant parent is a parent who has boundaries, has rules and expectations, but is also attuned, values communication with their children, and is willing to compromise, right? So they're in that middle ground, right? They're not letting kids walk all over them. They're not letting kids hit them.
Yeah, so I like this definition.
Right. So they have healthy boundaries, and it's important for us to have healthy boundaries, right? Because what boundaries we have in our home and with our bodies and with our children, that translates into what they expect in the real world, right? So if they learn at home, I can't hit my mom, that doesn't work for me. I'm certainly not going to do that with somebody out in the community that I don't have a relationship with. They're always going to challenge us as parents because they're just trying to figure things out. They're not doing it to make us mad and angry, even though it feels like it. They're just trying to figure out how to navigate their world. What happens when I hit people? What happens when I scream at my mom? What happens when I get really, really whiny with my parent when I can't have my way? What are the boundaries? So you have to have clear and appropriate boundaries because your kids are going to carry them with them. If you don't allow them to talk to you in a really disrespectful tone, then when they're around somebody later on in their life that's talking to them in a disrespectful tone, there's going to be a little alarm bell going off saying, I know I shouldn't be letting this person talk to me like this because my mom and dad have taught me that that's not acceptable for them. And it shouldn't be acceptable for me either. Right. So we can have clear boundaries and limits, and we can give those limits in loving ways that are still firm. Right. And I think that gentle parenting, so many people think that they have to let the children have the feelings and all of that and we do want them to have the feelings. Right. But we also want them to know that, like, if you're screaming, like, I like using a technique that called the 3 C's: calm, connect, correct. When kids are having those big emotions, whether it's they're hitting, whether it's they're screaming, whether they're whining, or whether they're just being sassy and disrespectful, right? That when they're doing those things, the first thing we have to do is, your body's out of control, right? Your body is angry or overwhelmed right now. It's time for you to go calm it down. So we go someplace and calm it. When they're young, we go with them. As they get older, they can go on their own, right? And learn that I go and I regulate myself. When they're done with that, then we can do some connection. We can snuggle on the couch. We can read a book. We can just chill out. Or, we can then move on if we need to the correction where, hey, remember when you were screaming at me, right?
Yeah.
What was going on there? Let's talk about this. So we're still going to get to the core of those emotions and help them process them. We're still in tune with them, but we're trying to structure it in a way where they start to learn emotional regulation. I got to calm myself. My mom and dad will help me with that if I need it. They're going to create a safe place for me to do that. And then once I've calmed myself, then if I feel like having that conversation with them, I can. If I feel like I can manage it on my own as I'm getting older, I can. I remember we did this with our kids when they were little, and our son was probably about 15 or 16, and he came home from school one day, the door slammed. You could hear things being thrown down, right? And he came through the living room and we said, "Hey, bud, how was your day?" And he said, "I had a really bad day. I'm really angry right now. I need to go up to my room and I need to calm myself. I'll come down and talk to you guys when I'm ready." And we were like, "Oh, okay." And he went upstairs and we were on the couch going, "Yes, yes. Woo, it worked." Right. And so later on he did. He came down and we were able to help him process what had happened and give him some guidance. And it was just a really beautiful moment. He learned that was not a punishment, this process, calm, connect, correct. It was a tool. And it's a tool that we can carry into adulthood. Because it's really what we do as adults usually, right? When we're really, really angry, we say, "I got to go to the bedroom." We shut the door. We crawl into bed, throw the blankets on. We kind of sit there for a little bit until we calm ourselves. Then we go out. We're still not back to 100%. This is that connection part, right? If somebody said something wrong, we could easily flip back over into the out of control. So we just got to kind of come out and give ourselves a little bit of time being around people. And then from there, once our brain is calm, then we can have the conversation. "Hey, I'm really sorry I lost it with you earlier. That really wasn't right. I shouldn't have done that." Right. So we're trying to teach that skill to kids from a young age. And it's highly, highly effective.
What I'm understanding is that this is gentle parenting. It's just that the terminology can be confusing to people.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with that term. I don't know. I don't like it. I'd rather say consultant parenting. But I think that that's what they meant by gentle parenting.
Yeah, because everything that you said right now, like, this is what, like, I try to do and what resonates with it's a little bit more connection driven and communicative than the parenting that I was raised with. But then it's not like, I think I think it's important to set boundaries and, for him to see us as like, authorities, not be too, lenient or whatever. So it's like something in the middle. Yeah.
I think one of the things that with the gentle parenting process is that that parents kind of get confused with some things. Like if your child is really dysregulated, that is not the time to try to process their emotions and to talk about, okay, you're angry. Oh,
Yeah.
that is not the time. If I was that enraged that I was on the floor kicking and screaming, somebody talking to me about my emotions in that moment would just further enrage me, right? We have to think about the sensory piece, right? The brain is flooded and overwhelmed. Angry brains don't listen. Angry brains can't learn, right? So the first step when they're dysregulated needs to be calming the body and then calming the brain through connection. Then we can do the education and the processing.
Right.
So less is more with young children. I always say that during the calming part of it, we are not talking at all other than one statement like, oh dear, your body is out of control, or you're really upset right now and your body is saying it needs to calm down. And I like using that kind of terminology so that kids can start to get into tune with how their emotions show up in their body. Right. So we can't keep that mind body connection, because if I can keep that mind body connection and start to recognize over time the signals my body sends when I'm getting upset, when I'm getting angry, it's going to be easier for me to catch it before I go off of the rails over time. Right. So saying, oh, you're really angry and your body is out of control right now. It's saying that it needs to calm down. And that's it. We don't say anymore. We calm. We don't say anything until they're not kicking, screaming, biting, pinching, the things that they were doing. Then we can say, hey, do you need to snuggle? Do you need a hug? And let them recoup. Then the teaching happens after that.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of like, I find this helpful too, in how you explained it. I try to think how I would feel in this situation, even though I'm an adult and this is a child. But I remember I was telling someone, like, how would you feel if you're like really upset and when people tell you like calm down, like everything's okay. Like you don't want to hear that. Let him. So that I think that's I love, but I like the terminology that you use, like telling them to like, you're upset right now, calm down, cultivating that mind body connection. I like this approach.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important what you said. Like if we could put ourselves in our kids' shoes more frequently, and think about if I was that mad, or like, you being a dietitian, right? Like parents like trying to make kids take bites off of stuff, right? And it's like, I don't want anybody shoving a spoon in my mouth after I said I don't want any. Why can't we honor that from our children?
Yes.
Right?
That's
not a way to motivate them.
Right.
Right. So it's like if we could put ourselves in our kids' shoes and then understand that we would get frustrated and what our responses would be. And we have decades of experience on being able to handle those things, and they don't. Right? They're still learning.
Yes,
it's such an important stage. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Man, I could talk to you for hours, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But like, I feel like you could be such a asset to people who want to have healthy relationships with their kids and create secure attachment. To like, how do you work? Can people to work with you online, or is it only in your location? How can people connect with you?
Now I have several programs, and one right now that I have that I think really speaks to kind of what we've been talking about is a program I developed called the Big Picture Parenting Program. What I find with the families that I've worked with over the years is they're really overwhelmed with their child's behavior, right? Really overwhelmed with that. So we start with understanding the development, for both toddlers, preschoolers, and then get going right into strategies. What are some things that you can do to help diminish some of these behaviors? We come up with a plan. How are we going to get rid of, diminish these behaviors? Once we start feeling a little bit less stressed, right? Because we're not having the hitting all day long, or we're not having the throwing of toys all day long, then we can dive a little bit deeper into figuring out really their child's unique wiring, figuring out their parenting style, right? And use that to build that foundation to continue to work on the behaviors and the things that they're struggling with. And it's just such a beautiful progression to see. I was just having it's called, like I said, the Big Picture Parenting Program. I was speaking with a mom last night. And when we started, she was so stressed out. Like it was just chaos in her house. It was just constant screaming and dysregulation. Now, that is very infrequent. And now in the program, we're getting to the deeper stuff, right? Like, how are we going to build empathy? Yeah. How do we build connection? How do we work on sibling relationships and build that strength in that relationship early on? How do we build our identity as a family? How do we work on healthy communication now, knowing that it's going to serve our family forever? Right. So we get into all of that. So it's designed to kind of start with where the crisis is.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get that under control. And then we go down the chain and we get to the depth of like the bigger picture of parenting, that plan. What do we want it to look like? I always say to parents, what do you want your kids to do as adults? What kind of relationship do you want? Oh, I want them to love coming home. Okay. Well, then we better start working on that now. Right. And that's our connection with them, how we communicate with them, how they feel safe, seen, heard, loved, and that they mattered. If they have those 5 things in place, they're going to want to come see you on holidays. They're going to want to come home frequently.
Yeah.
They're going to want to have those phone calls.
Yeah, and I feel like people think about, like, they think these early years, they underestimate them or downplay them.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's just like you said, I think about that too. I want my son to be happy to come home. And people like laugh that you're like talking about this from such a young age. But I think that's when it starts, like you mentioned, cultivating that attachment. And then, as they get older.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for
So
sure. I mean,
it's
if we
never
can
too
put
early.
It is never too early. I mean, it's if we think about just even the brain and how it's learning, there are windows of opportunity when children are young, and when they're little, those windows are all the way open. And different areas, the windows start to close. Like language is one that starts to close around 7 or 8, and that's why, like as adults, we can still learn a second language, but it's way harder because our window only opens that far. And that's those first 5 years, all of these windows are wide open. And then they start to slowly shut. It doesn't mean that we can't change things as our kids get older, but it's going to be harder. If we can start early and be intentional with the foundation we're trying to build for our kids, it's going to make the remaining years so much easier. Especially like the strategies in my program. It's like I always tell the parents, this one you're going to use until they're teenagers. You can start it at 2 and use it until they're teens. And it'll be so much easier because when they're teens and they hear those words coming out of your mouth, they're going to be like, all right, I know. Yeah, dead end. I might as well move on. I know where this is going. Right. So it makes the later years much easier. And how they go through 2s is how they go through teens. Just an FYI.
Okay, I've heard that before, but so you're confirming that theory.
Yeah, it's the same social emotional stage that they're going through, separation, individuation. They want to be independent. They don't want to need us, but they do still need us. And it's this kind of conflict that they have there. Teens want to be able to do all the adult things, but sometimes they still want to, just snuggle with mom and dad on the couch and stay home and watch movies, right? So it's the same kind of tug and pull that we see them going through as toddlers.
Wow. Thank you so much. So do you have like a website or something that you want to mention? I'll put everything in the show notes as well, where people can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to my website at thementormomblog.com. And I have all sorts of links there to my programs. And you can also find my socials there. I have a YouTube channel where I have lots of information, like videos on like the Calm, Connect, Correct, and how to understand your child's unique wiring. So they can find a lot of that information over there.
All right. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure. I hope we can do this again. I have more questions.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
A lot of busy moms put their health on the back burner, and I know because I was one of them. There I was, a nutritionist who preached health and wellness before I had my baby, and then I had my son, and my world was flipped upside down. And during the first 6 months postpartum, the idea of just like working out and eating healthy and all of it, my whole life before just seemed like a distant dream. But as cliche as it sounds, it's so true when they say you can't pour from an empty cup. I remember one day it just dawned on me. I was just like, man, like I matter. I need to take care of myself. Like if I'm not well, then, it's going to reflect on everything. So I just decided, like in baby steps, just like I would work with my clients, I had to apply this to myself, start practicing what I preach. First of all, giving myself grace. Asking for help is a big one, and just starting creating healthy routines, which brings me to my gift to you today. If any of that describes you, or maybe it doesn't, but you just want to prevent that overwhelm, burnout, then I highly encourage you to head over to my website. I'll have the link in the show notes and sign up for my free 8-week Mom Wellness Simplified Roadmap. Once a week, you'll receive a small wellness habit straight to your inbox designed specifically for busy moms. Each new habit will help you make a small but meaningful step towards reclaiming your vitality. So by the end of it, you'll have 8 easy to implement habits that fit seamlessly into your routine. Again, everything is tailored to fit into a hectic schedule because I believe that prioritizing your health shouldn't cause you more stress. I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom running a business on the side, so I make sure everything is achievable. And I know it'll be valuable to any mom out there who needs a bit of a restart, and it's free. So you can enroll now. The link will be in the show notes, and I'll see you there.
And it's a ticket talking Mazda for the figures. That's a comma and a comma and a comma. Gotta get it, get it.
And it's a ticket talking